what do we do to make those people still feel like they're being a part of the team? I would say if your team is getting swag during that offsite, send them a swag box. Make sure that they feel like they're still a part of it. We're still thinking of you. It could be as small as like an Uber gift card for their kids. Make dinner on us tonight. Don't worry about it. Order in. We're all having dinner out. Now you can too. Just make them feel like they're part of the experience, that they're part of the team. And then the next time, if it was the reason that they were like introverted and just couldn't like think of being in a room with a bunch of people, they might think twice the next time. They've been included in the group so much, like, wow, these people are really awesome. Maybe I really do want to meet them in person. It kind of brought somebody out of their shell in a really thoughtful way, and then you have those other much more complicated situations, like you at home have your wife or your partner with your 3 kids, and you're like, I can't leave them. My wife doesn't cook, or maybe somebody's disabled or something. Those are the same situations where you can send a gift card to that family. Be like, here, take care of your kids for the next 3 days. What do you need in order to make this an easier trip for you?
Hey everyone, welcome to Leading from Afar, a show by remote leaders for remote leaders, where we dive into the most important topics facing leaders in the future of work. I'm your host, Scott Markovitz. I was the first hire at Envision, one of the first all-remote companies back in 2012. I've since helped build and scale multiple remote teams as an early employee or consultant. In each episode, we geek out doing deep dives on specific topics like within async, hiring the best talent anywhere, how to create a fun and engaging environment remotely, and so much more. This show was created to help managers leading remotely upskill themselves to help them build world-class remote cultures. If you enjoy this content, please feel free to support me by subscribing in your favorite podcasting app, share it with friends and colleagues, and feel free to buy me a coffee via the show's website. Everybody, thanks for tuning into today's episode of Leading from Afar with me, your host, Scott Markovitz. You're in for both a real treat and a real learning experience today, all about IRLs. Today, I'm joined by one of my new very good friends, Liz Leary, a fellow remote OG just like myself. Liz has been planning and organizing company IRLs, team IRLs, individual meetups for years, starting with Trello and now with their parent company, Atlassian. This episode is jam-packed with so much knowledge, it probably should be an online course. So if you're remote or you're a hybrid leader thinking about or planning IRLs, get your pen and pencil or your pencil and pen ready because your mind will be blown. Enjoy. Good morning, Liz. How's everything going in New Jersey?
It's great. It's rainy. It's ugly. I'm glad I'm inside.
Indeed, yeah. It's raining here for the first time in, I don't know, weeks. So it's a nice change. Yes, it's kind of cold and windy and like not so nice to be outside, but at least it's nice of a change. And I definitely don't miss the winters of New York, New Jersey. And I've always said, if it's going to be cold, like maybe it should be Colorado. There's snow on the ground all the time, and it's cold. Okay, there's snow that you get, but if it's cold and it's wet, especially wet and cold, like, oh no, thank you. This is just miserable.
Yeah, that's kind of exactly how it is. It's like a weird mix between hail and rain and you sleet, and you kind of don't know what it is, and it's miserable. So rather stay inside today, nice and warm, lock up in the office until I have to go grab my kids. So
it sounds like a good way to pass the day.
Yes, absolutely.
So the way that we start each episode is simply by telling us a little bit about yourself. And you, like me, are a fellow remote OG who've also been doing this a long time, obviously now through Atlassian, but you'll kind of give the story of how you came through, that story. But yeah, give us a little bit about yourself, your journey through remote work, and especially your interaction with IRLs.
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey in tech started in 2016, I think it was now. And I started with Trello. They, at the time, were just this little startup that could, 45 people just like trying to make a product.
They were
And
awesome.
I came on as actually as the executive assistant to their team, their leadership team, which at the time was 8 people. Um, but when I came in, it was very clear that we were all relatively the same age. They had never had an executive assistant before. I had never worked in tech. And so when we sat down to have a conversation, they were like, we really don't know how to use you. We know we need you, but we don't know what we need you for. So essentially, build your role. What do you want to do here? Which was the absolute best thing that could have ever happened. Because it just made me realize, that employee experience and building events and different experiences for teams was actually the perfect thing for me to do. So I was only with them about 6 months before we were acquired by Atlassian. And Atlassian really did kind of pick us up because we were one of the pioneers of remote work. And, they had this huge company that was growing exponentially, and they wanted to really embrace some of the values that Trello had. So I know that had a little to do with it. And when we came on, I was very adamant about keeping the Trello culture because, along with my leadership team, we had really built something special. And it was important because, as you said, IRLs are really, really important, especially for remote work teams. And that was a huge component of our culture. So we did every year this thing called Trello Together. And it was a global retreat where we went to a nice secluded area and did no work for 3 days. So that was like the key, was no work. We connected, we bonded, we had drinks by pools, we, played all kinds of games and things together. And we got to know each other. And when we went home, we were just that more energized to make this product and do it together as a team. And we were truly a team at that point. So once I did my first Trello Together and I planned it from top to bottom, I was hooked. I was like, this is exactly what I need to be doing with my life, and just bringing people together and doing all the things. So I kind of just built from there, and I started doing offsites for the teams and, just employee programs, life cycle gifting, just everything to make an employee feel seen, heard, and appreciated. It's been 7 years, and I'm not looking, no regrets. Let's just say that.
Amazing. And your role now at Atlassian, I think you just took on a new role, if I'm correct.
Yeah, it's very, very new. Right now, I'm the senior project coordinator for the events and connections team, which is essentially solving connecting for the global team rather than my little Trello bubble. So
That's the way you're supposed to do it, right? You solve a problem once, and okay, now you replicate it in larger spaces. Your intro had so many things to unpack, right? There's
yeah.
how many questions that we're gonna start rolling, but probably the simplest place, and you even highlighted this, truly, like, what is an IRL, right? In real life, okay, what does that mean? Because when we spoke offline or we spoke previously, the old mentality of an IRL or company retreat was, right, we work in an office 5 days a week, and now we go somewhere. We go on a workation, and we go to, I don't know, wherever it is, and then we do work. But in essence, the things that you've mentioned, like fun and games and all the time, it's obviously one and one kind of don't align up. So start off again, definition of an IRL, and also what you said, and I believe, and they're super duper important. Why are they super duper important?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I would say IRLs always need to be about social engagement, especially if you're a remote team. I have always wanted to kind of take the idea of offsites and flip it on its head. When you talk to somebody who, especially companies who are not in tech and everything, you say the word offsite to them, it immediately triggers being in a conference room, being talked at for 2 hours, going over roadmaps, just mind-numbing work. And it's just like, we work remotely. We've been working remotely for 2.5 years. We've been doing all the work. Why am I doing more work when I come and we've spent all this money to see person to person? And it just makes so much more sense to, use those opportunities to connect and to get to know the person that's on the other side of the screen. I mean, I've heard horror stories about companies who have a camera off policy. Like when they're talking in meetings, like they, all you hear is their voice. They're using Zoom, but they're not using the video. It makes no sense. And you also have no idea who that person is. So why would I bring that team in person and then be like, we're going to do more work now? It doesn't make any sense to me, so IRLs are so important for that spark that you need, that like, it's like hitting the speed, you're going full, you're saying, it's all about the company. It's all about our employee. We want you to know each other, and I actually always say you need to know the people you're working with, not know of them. And in a lot of circumstances, we do know of people and we've heard their name and we've probably been on Zoom calls with them. But if you were asked, do you know if they're, they have a partner? Do you know if they have kids? Do you know what kind of situations are happening behind the scenes that are impacting their work? You might be making assumptions about somebody with no knowledge, and that's why IRLs are important. You need that context to be able to work successfulgoing
I couldn't agree more. Again, there was so much in that to unpack. We could probably be here all day long, but at some point, the kids are going to be calling to get picked up from school, so I don't think it's going to be helpful. But yes, the ideas of these Zoom calls with screens off. I can understand why they do it. Why? Because they're sitting on back to back
It literally
Zoom
hurts
calls.
my heart to hear that.
Yes, so they're obviously using tools in the wrong way.
Yeah.
But in the other sense, it's like, hey, video is the best medium in remote environments because it's the closest you can get to in real life, right? I could see your face, I could see your mannerisms, I could see how you behave. And I've said, and something that you've also noted, that I can get to know you better through Zoom than I ever would in the office. Because in the office, it was like, Liz, right, you were the IRL person. No, Scott, you were the customer success person. Like, that's all I knew about you. But when I see you and I see your kids and I see your spouse and I see a cat and I see books, how many conversations I've had on this podcast or on various Zoom calls where somebody sees like a book in my background or I see a picture of them whitewater rafting over their shoulder. I'm like, oh, whitewater rafting. When I was a kid, like every summer I went whitewater rafting. Exactly. And I mean, that's where connections happen. It's like on those mutual interests of things that you have in common that you can kind of build that off. So yes, focusing on relationship building, and that's the idea. So kind of diving into that a little bit more. In essence, I believe that there's kind of three types of IRLs. You have your company retreat, right, where you get the whole company together, especially maybe smaller companies. Atlassian is probably quite a bit different because it's significantly larger, but you get a whole team into one location. Wonderful. Number two is you get teams together, whether it's your sales team or your support team or your leadership team or what have you. Exactly. Yeah. And then number three, it's having a policy, being very open to saying, hey, right, Liz, you're in New Jersey. Scott, you're in, Philadelphia. You know what, Liz, do you want to come to Philadelphia? Hey, we're going to pay for your gas. We're going to pay for your train ticket. Go eat, some Philly steaks. We're going to pay for that. Like, we're going to enable you to spend time on like a one-to-one or one to small kind of group. So I'd love to kind of hear, do you think those are on par? Are there other types of IRLs? And I think into that, is there a difference in what you do? Because again, yes, the idea, especially company retreat, when you're schlepping around the world, right? As I had a newsletter a couple of weeks ago, if you're traveling around the world to do work in an IRL, it's like, commuting 60 minutes to do a Zoom call. Yeah. But that's great for companies. But what happens if you're a team? So when just teams get together, is it still the same mix, or maybe it's a little bit more work, or certainly when it's like one-to-one, right? If you and I are going to get together, there's probably the assumption that we're just not going to hang out and have like a 3-hour lunch, then go for like 2-hour coffees, and the company's going to pay for that. We're going to co-work together for the day. So is there kind of a difference in nuance between different types of IRLs and what happens at all those?
Yeah, I think for the most part. I think you're right about the different ones. I think there are even more IRLs that you could be doing, like especially for workplace experience teams, like we're doing right now. We're doing a podcast. We're talking to each other. We're getting inspiration. Like, go externally facing as well. Bring in those experts so you can be on top of the trends and everything. Know what people are doing, and those are the ways that you get inspiration for your own culture. So I think IRLs for like networking purposes, like a nice dinner or something like that. That's really, really important for teams to do. Just open up their culture and, pay it forward a little bit if you think you're doing it right, and like find out how you're doing it wrong, because not everybody's perfect, So I would say, yes, we like Trello together. You were saying the first type is like your global retreat. You're bringing everybody together to do, 3 days of events and things like that, and whatever that means for your company. And then there's like the typical offsite that you're thinking of, like, when I was with my last year on Trello, essentially, I did a program called Team Times. And basically none of our teams had gotten together in person because of the pandemic for the last couple of years. And people were craving connection. And it started off as like, okay, listen, I'm going to give you the option based on your comfort level and your team's comfort level. You can either come to New York City and have an in-person, IRL, and I will plan it from top to bottom, and you can bring your whole team in, or you can all do a virtual event, which I will also plan for you. It depends upon your comfort level. So I put that out there to all of our teams, and we're talking about like sales is going to do one, and product management, and all the little facets of our business and all those teams. And about half, I would say about 11 teams at first were like, yeah, we want to come to New York City. We want to come have an IRL. Like, it's really important. We all feel comfortable doing it. And the other the other few teams, there was about 25 in all, were like, oh, we'll do a virtual. We have a few people who are, not feeling the IRL thing. And I was like, okay, great. I'm going to make both of these things very interactive, very connective, so you don't feel like you're missing out either way. Well, when we had the first couple of teams come for IRLs, we had such a huge success rate for them that little by little, I had team managers pinging me being like, is it too late? Can I do an IRL? Like, we're hearing such great things, I was like, yeah. So by the time the 4 months that I was running these was over, I had very close to 100% IRL teams. I had brought over 25 teams to New York City for an IRL. But it shows you just how important and how much they took away from that experience and how much it energized them for the next few. So I think those types of IRLs are right on point for what you're saying. And I think you could do those little, I call them water cooler moments, and they don't have to be like offsites that are completely planned or anything, but like if you're a workplace experience person, and I would highly encourage people to have a scheduled spontaneity. Have those moments where people can get up from their desk, they can stretch their legs, and they can be like, all right, who's around to talk to today? And get to know somebody, and, curate those moments so that they happen. Or seem to happen organically.
Yeah, I love that idea. I over during COVID had built a side project to do that virtually, and within Slack, of, again, tools that are out there. I've been very much focused on scheduling ahead of time and only like once every other week. And for me, it's like, that's not how people meet each other. That's not how people used to go for coffee breaks in the office, right? You did it at least once a day, probably multiple times a day. So for me, I'd kind of redesign that concept of very much focused on you, the individual. When's a good time for you? Kind of raise your hand. Someone else in the world, they put their hand up at the same time, and they're like, okay, let's make that match and introduce you. But I think those micro interactions and giving the ability for people to spend time with each other. I've spoken with a number of companies who are very much thinking in this direction of, hey, we create a budget and we have a policy that anyone can spend up to X amount of money to go work with somebody else or a group of other people, knowing that especially I think my follow-up question will be, well, kind of all started here of, is there a magic number of times to get
Oh,
together? Because one could think, as an extrovert, right? Hey, let's do this all the time. This should be like every
yeah,
month. This should
exactly.
be,
This is great. I'll do this
yeah,
all the
like,
time.
yeah, I would have fun all the time, but that's obviously not the case, even for extroverts, especially when you're traveling. Like,
No.
if I had to go, travel to America or even Europe, like once a month, it's like, no thanks. So, is
Yeah,
there
I was just gonna ask you, what do you feel like the magic number is? What was the magic number? What did Envision have like a magic number?
So they didn't. They did. They hosted two company-wide IRLs, and they had a
Okay.
number of team retreats, which even that I think mostly happened to be within like engineering or sales. So some of the teams unfortunately kind of got left out
Yeah.
of those opportunities. But I'd probably say two IRLs a year. So I think one company retreat and one team meetup, I think are the right mix, especially if you have globally distributed people that, again, the IRL that Envision that I went to was in Arizona. So to get to Arizona from over here is quite a trip. So that if I would think I have to go there multiple times a year, that's certainly not
Yeah.
optimal. But then I think, again, when you mix in that third piece of, hey, I'm in Tel Aviv, or maybe I'm in Europe. I think Europe's probably the best example because it's so easy to get around Europe. Of, hey, no, you want to go between cities, you want to take a train, you want to take a 30 euro flight and get a cheap hotel. Like, yes,
Yeah.
we'll enable you. We'll create a policy, we'll create a procedure, and with a budget around it. That in between those two times a year that the team or the company get together, hey, if you want to go spend time with people, of course, like
Yeah,
we're
I
definitely
think
going to
it's
enable that.
absolutely necessary to have a dedicated budget for it, T&E, like travel and expenses, or, just wrapped in with employee experience. And, I've always had this like dream idea of there being like that budget dedicated over the fiscal year essentially. And what I think the magic number looks like is the global retreat for Trello. We did them once a year. We brought everybody together once a year, and because we did it so big, it was enough. And it made people feel like, well, that's a really long trip for somebody from Australia. Like we have to make this worth it. So I think that answered the question. And then you supplement, but you don't have to supplement with IRLs because nobody wants that many IRLs. Nobody wants to travel that much. We all have different obligations in life. People have families, people have people they're taking care of. Like we just can't. You can't put that on your people. So I think the one global retreat, then maybe two like mini offsites a year. So, and the stipulation with them is you have to have the offsite in the area that has the largest contingent of people on your team. So not a lot of people are traveling to a faraway destination. And even better, if you have a brick and mortar office these days, some remote teams don't. They are fully remote. But for Atlassian, we tether the offsites to an office. It's like you're either going to ATX or you're going to New York, and you use the office as a home base. You're not going to be there the whole time, but it's somewhere that allows for you to come in, hang out with your team, but also get to know the people that are in that office and get to know that office's culture and really be immersed in that, which I think is really, really important. So tethering to a place will save you in cost, and it'll also save you in like food and expenses in general, because you can have, if you have company lunches, you can have the team eat lunch, and then they have all of those moments of connection during lunch, so you have one of those. So I think you should give two mini offsites a year, and they can put those at the beginning of the year around the global retreat, just so they're spaced out. They should never be too close together. And then supplement with virtual. At least once a quarter, everybody gets together to have a really kick-ass virtual event. And those cost no money at all. And there are so many amazing vendors who do them. Like there's Team Class and Confetti and like all of these amazing people who just curate these like kits and things and send them to you. And it's really a great experience, and everybody loves to get mail, right? So
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
keep them involved. But I think that nice breath, just having something to look forward to. And I think it would be awesome if companies started to think more thoughtfully about having that calendar of events when they go into their new FY, when they're doing their annual planning. It's like, okay, we're going to do our global retreat in the middle of the year. We're going to give them the opportunity to have here's the budget for 2 offsites for whatever time of year that works for your team. And then here is the budget for your 4 virtual events. And you can use those whatever time you feel is necessary. But have that planned out, be thoughtful about it, and make sure that because if people have that at their fingertips and they're like, okay, well, we have to do this, and it's almost like a mandate, they'll do it, and they will connect, and they'll be like, we have this money, like, let's use it. Like, why are we wasting it? So putting the onus on the team is always really, really important.
Again, God, there's too much to unpack here. Again, I think we're going to be spending the day here together.
I'm glad I have a lot of coffee.
The first question, and I'm interested to hear your perspective, because I'm going to come from the side of not agreeing with one of your points, but I always like to hear and be educated, because I love to have the opportunity to kind of change my mind. Yeah. The point of anchoring them to specific offices, like a kind of mini retreat to an office. I'd come with the mentality of, it's kind of I guess a missed opportunity for the people that are in office to have a trip, to have an experience, like they're going somewhere. So in essence, like the whole IRL concept is like you're going somewhere. Yes, you're meeting people, but you're traveling somewhere. So we're going to get into like where to go and all the other stuff. But if you're kind of just home, or maybe if you're in New York City, you get to stay at a hotel instead of commuting in from New Jersey to Long Island. Like, so again, you kind of have that experience, but it's still like, hey, I'm in New York all the time. Like, so for me, it's kind of just, yes, I guess I'm more commuting in these 3 days to kind of meet the people who are coming in, but maybe I'm losing out on some of the other experience. Yes, maybe there's another one. So the other one I get to travel, because in theory, the other one's not going to be in New York.
That's essentially what you have to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, you have to be thoughtful about that, because you're absolutely right. There are all those people. But for the most part, I found in my experience that people are excited, especially in New York. People are excited who live in New York City to show off their city, and they're like, and also just the added experience of like, yeah, you get to spend a night in the hotel that all of your team is hanging out in. Like, absolutely. Like, you don't have to go home to your house in Jersey. Like, you are on vacation, essentially. It's a staycation for you. But it's also, there's something about knowing where you are and being able to give people that context and everything, and kind of be proud of it and show it off. And I know we have a slightly very different situation at Atlassian than we do for, other offices who are fully remote and don't have offices to do this in. Our office culture is very, very important. We work very hard to have a very robust culture in there, and different cultures in each of the offices, so you do want to come in and take part in that. And a lot of the people who are everyday, regulars into the office are excited to show people around. And if you are a remote company that are listening and really want to do something like this and be like, oh, I would love to bring people to my city and show them my city, then, you can solve it by not even getting a WeWork, but getting a much nicer, Airbnb kind of spot, that's thoughtful and that feels homey, that they're returning to, that they kind of set up roots in for 3 days, and really make it feel intentional.
Yeah, absolutely. I was working with a company in Berlin during the pandemic who was going back and forth of whether to keep the office or not keep the office. And a good chunk of their people were in the Berlin region. And that was the solution I gave them. I'm like, you're spending X for this large office that obviously during the pandemic you can't really use, or people aren't comfortable going. But hey, why don't you take some of that money, and you know what, maybe once every 6 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever is good with the company, and rent out a villa somewhere in around Berlin where it's easy enough to get to, cater food, barbecue. And so you have the opportunity to get people together, right? To build relationships, have fun. If you want to anchor it around like a quarterly kickoff or something like that, okay, no problem.
Yeah.
But you don't need to come to an office, right? That fun and team building and collaborating doesn't have to be linked to an office. So completely agree there. A couple other points. So again, obviously the whole idea of this podcast is really to open someone's eyes again and kind of also focus, I think, especially in this topic, of things that
Yeah.
maybe people wouldn't necessarily think about. And you said two things before. No, number one, if somebody's coming from Australia, and number two, if somebody's coming with a family. And I think those are very nuanced things to think about. Where I have 4 kids, so when I went to the Envision IRL, right, my wife was here with. Actually, I think my daughter was born after that, so it was 3 kids. But when they have a couple of kids at home, of
Still a
thinking,
lot.
hey, right, there's a spouse that's at home with
Yeah.
kids, and now just one set less hands. And
Yeah.
how do companies think about that? And those thoughtful companies are saying, hey, okay, we're going to give you a budget, right? We're going to give you every money to bring in food, delivery food, or to pay for babysitting, right? To kind of cover where you would have obviously been there and helpful at home. So I think that's one side of just having like the little thoughtful pieces outside of this whole big, again, focusing on the event, right? The space and what you're going to do. That's going to be a follow-up question. But hey, the people who are coming,
Yeah.
like thinking about the impact of their travel and the people they're with, and kind of a secondary to maybe the thing in Australia of some people that maybe can't come for whatever reason. There's something going on, there's a pandemic, what have you. And how do you still reward that person, and give them an opportunity to get together, or give them a budget of taking a trip, maybe bringing someone from Australia to New York would cost $10,000-$15,000. So the company says, hey, you know what, we're going to give you $2,500 to take a trip, to take a vacation, because we still want you to experience having a trip. Especially maybe we'll give it to you to go to some city, where we have an office, or to meet up with colleagues. And I think last season, one of the seasons, I had a CEO who just came back from an IRL that his company hosted in Europe. I think most of the team is in Europe. And he had a group of employees that are in the Gulf region. And because of where they were, like there was issues with visas or getting in or what have you. So they thought, hey, it's not fair, or they're listing out.
Yeah.
So what they did is they created their own kind of Gulf region IRL just to ensure that, hey, they still had the opportunity. Okay, it's not with the entire company, but they still had the opportunity to kind of get together. So we'd love, again, to hear your thoughts and things that you're thinking about, right? Because I know we've had very deep conversations of all those things that probably no one else is thinking of. Hey, right? Spouses.
1,000 things flying through my head right
Yeah,
now.
like kids travel, like all these little nuanced things that are not the
Yeah.
space, like not what you're doing, like thinking like outside the box. We're gonna love to hear some thoughts and things that are going
Yeah,
on your head.
no, you're right. So much to unpack there. I'm like, what do I say first? I think the first thing would be, commenting about. I think it brings it back to these offsites or IRLs have to be about social engagement. They can't be about work. And this is another reason why they can't be about work. Because when you have people who can't attend for whatever reason it is, they can't feel like they're missing something that's integral to their job. They have to feel like, okay, I'm missing out on connecting with people. Yes, it's a bummer. I have FOMO. This sucks. But I'm not going to be completely lost on the roadmap. Or I'm not going to know what's not happening in annual planning. Like, I'm not going to feel that disconnected from my team when it comes to the workflow of it. And I think that is so important. Take that pressure away from it. Let them know, like, this is the intention for our IRL. And if you can't attend this, or you don't want to attend this, like, we have to think about like those introverts who are like, this is the most terrifying thought I've ever experienced. I don't want to go to New York City and be in a huge city with loud sounds and a whole bunch of people I don't know. Like, that's a nightmare. And you have to be thoughtful of those people. And so they can't feel like they're going to miss out on something and, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. People are going to hate me. Then I'm not. No, you're missing out on a hangout. That's basically, and that's not your thing anyway, so it's okay. And for those people, to your point of like, what do we do to make those people still feel like they're being a part of the team? I would say if your team is getting swag during that offsite, send them a swag box. Make sure that they feel like they're still a part of it. We're still thinking of you. Send that. It could be as small as like an Uber gift card for their kids. Like make dinner on us tonight. Don't worry about it. Order in. Like, we're all having dinner out. Now you can too. Just make them feel like they're part of the experience, that they're part of the team. And then the next time, if it was the reason that they were like introverted and just couldn't like think of being in a room with a bunch of people, they might think twice the next time. They've been included in the group so much, like, wow, these people are really awesome. Maybe I really do want to meet them in person. And then you've kind of brought somebody out of their shell in a really thoughtful way, and then you have those other much more complicated situations, like you at home with your, you have your wife or your partner with your 3 kids, and you're like, I can't leave them, like my wife doesn't cook, or maybe somebody disabled or something. Those are the same situations where you can send a gift card to that family and be like, here, take care of your kids for the next 3 days. What do you need in order to make this an easier trip for you? And I think a really good point you had was like the regional connection kind of part of it. Atlassian is doing something right now with regional connections, and it's just, since we are Team Anywhere and we're a remote team right now, and we're mostly tethering our offsites and things to offices, we're like, well, what do you do with the people who are not near an office? So we're, Atlassian is giving them budget and giving them the opportunity, like, hey, do you want to go see a Broadway show and get a bunch of Atlassians together and go do that as a group? Here you go. They're really putting the intention back into intentional gathering and making sure that, the people that are on the outskirts and can't get in for whatever reason are taken care of. And I think it just takes that little extra thought to it, and, to make sure that you are always thinking in a team mentality and not as an individual coming to these IRLs.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So before I think we go super deep on what you're actually doing and all those little bits and pieces about the IRL, I wanted to bring, again, back a point that, again, you opened up the question very nicely, so thank you for that. Of, hey, if teams are going to get together twice a year, 3 times a year, that's not the only engagement that you could do. And a core fundamental piece is also the virtual relationship building. So whether it's virtual IRLs, whether it's using tools like Confetti, Lee from Confetti is a very good friend. I've had her on the podcast, I think Season 2.
Lee Rubin, I love Lee.
Yeah, she's a very good friend as well. I'll say that she got a special shout out.
Yes.
So maybe talk a little bit about the importance, because when we think about it, right, if we just get together in real life, we're supercharged, we're energized, we're excited, we built great relationships, we had great conversations. And now if we think, hey, the next time we're going to see this person, I'm going to see Liz in 6 months. Like, you want to kind of keep that momentum going and that energy going. And that's where, and similar, okay, now the next thing is 6 months away. We don't want kind of that to fizz out, and we want you to get excited. And we want you to build relationships with Liz and be more excited to meet Liz and spend time with her in person. So maybe share a little bit on the ideas of what companies should be thinking about in the ways of virtual engagement. Is it virtual IRLs? Is it, again, using Confetti, doing just games, fun, TED Talks, book clubs, like some things, again, that can build that relationship in between those times where people are actually getting together in person?
Oh, this is such a fun conversation because I have like so many thoughts on virtual events because, people think, well, because we had the horrible experience of the pandemic, people are just like burnt on virtual. They're like, I don't want to be on a computer. Playing a game on a computer with a bunch of people, it sounds awful at this point. Like, I want to be in person. And as much as I understand that, it's not possible all the time, especially if you're a remote company. So what do we do in order to bridge that gap? You have exceptional virtual events, not just like, I'm going to throw some people into a Zoom room and do some awkward icebreaker. First of all, I hate icebreakers. Can I tell you how much I hate icebreakers?
Please do.
Oh, God. Yeah, it's like the worst awkward gathering thing to do. It's like people think it's like mandatory when you get in. It's like, okay, let's all talk about ourselves. It's like, oh, all right. But there's so many better ways to do it. But anyway, off on a tangent. Virtual events, I think, like I was saying, Team Class, Confetti, these are virtual event platforms that are like thoughtfully thinking of these kinds of events and making sure that it doesn't feel like a virtual event. You are engaged. You're learning something that you want to learn. Another way, other than even just like those planned virtual events, is I started a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. I wanted to test it out for Atlassian and see if it was something that I don't know, that I could turn into an event that people could sign up, a campaign, random people from the company. So I put together a bunch of New York office, just from each product on Atlassian, and we all came together. And a friend of mine has a best friend from childhood who is a dungeon master, like a virtual dungeon master, and he is exceptional. His name is Dustin Goddard, and he's incredible. So he puts together the whole storyline, the whole campaign. You know, he helps you in the session 0. Everybody builds their characters together, and you get such insight into people when you see like what their alter ego is in their characters, you know, and it starts these like really like in-depth relationships with people you wouldn't even have like crossed in the hallway. You know, like I would have never had the opportunity to talk to this person being from Trello and that person on Confluence. Our work doesn't really, you know, it's not cross-functional at all. But now I'm in there and I know intimate details of this person's life. And it was an eye-opener. So it's virtual events that are just thoughtful like that, and just like campaigns, and you can do book clubs. Like you said, I have a chat in Slack of Survivor talk. People who are just fans of Survivor and just want to get together. Like you can use Slack for that reason. I know people are kind of over Slack because, you know, notifications and just a lot of noise, and you can get lost on it like any social media platform. But you know, there's really good uses for it, but there's a ton of different things you can do, you know, for virtual and to keep virtual interesting. Did Envision do like anything virtually to kind of supplement their IRLs?
They didn't, which again, I guess is somewhat unfortunate. Yeah, they didn't really do it. A bunch of companies that I've worked with since, either as an employee or as a advisor, is something that I heavily invest in. And even as a team leader, you know, the previous role I had, I was running 2 teams, and I ran my teams asynchronous by default, especially the work portion, right? For me to share some information, to read off a presentation, like, heaven forbid, like, because how many times I've sat in there like, God, just please send me the freaking thing. Like, let me read it. I'll ask you all the questions I have. I'll give you all the feedback, but don't make me sit here for 30, 60 minutes. So
This is a pointless gathering right now.
Exactly. So all that third stuff is done asynchronously. Those time slots remained in the calendar where it's relationship building. So as a team, we were playing games, we're doing show and tells, we're doing whatever as a team. Awesome. Co-working half hours, co-working hours, like come together, come down, like drop in, drop out. It was talk about work, talk about whatever. Just those intentional opportunities to just get people together and spend time together.
Almost.
Yeah.
You have to have rituals on your team to keep the energy and the momentum going.
Yep.
You know, it's like, do you all love yoga? Have we found out everybody loves yoga? Great. Yep. On Monday mornings, we're going to do breathing.
Absolutely.
You know, like those kinds of little touches are, you know, so underrated.
Yep.
You know, people look at it and they're like, oh God, this like new age bullshit, right? Like, you know, like all of these like Gen Zers want to like get their yoga in, you know, and it's like, no, it's not. It's actually fundamental. Like,
yeah. And I think, I mean, it's so important, that point. It's, again, if you're sitting in Zoom meetings and meetings, like, yes, again, okay, now I got to go jump on some other thing. It's like, it's tiring. But if you're able to be asynchronous by default, or heavily on the asynchronous side where you don't have all those crap meetings that you shouldn't have, that should be an email, presentation, a video, or what have you, then those opportunities, like, yes, people want to actually spend time together. And it was funny, I had, in the beginning when I implemented this policy, I had, I think, 2 people out on my team, and I said, okay, no, we're going to cancel the team fund for this week, right? Because I was thinking more of those 2 people. I didn't want them to miss out. Right. And every other week, I had like a kind of a stand-up that went to everybody and just asked for feedback. Like, how am I doing? What can I be doing? Honest feedback. And one person had given me the feedback saying, you know, sometimes I feel like we're a bit too asynchronous. It's like, I really missed that opportunity to hang out as a team that was canceled. And I was like, holy crap, you're so right. Number one, I should never cancel. It doesn't matter who can't come, but those things should always be there. And number 2, this shouldn't be the only thing that we're doing. We should be adding more things in there. And think, right, if you were getting away from pointless times of getting people together and focusing more on useful time of getting people together, even virtually, then those things have to be crucial. And I think one of my feedback that I've given to Lee, and I've given to a couple other people that I've spoken to, it's, I think, the real essence here. it's making sure those virtual events are interactive, right?
Yes.
Because if you're trying to replace, okay, the cooking thing, right? You
Yeah.
have, if you're in the office cooking, right, you can, have like a food fight and making pasta, you throw like flour at each other or whatever. But if you're
No,
virtual,
movie time.
yeah, but if you're virtual and one person, a chef is teaching you how to do that, you're alone in like your own apartment and things like that, or doing chess master is teaching you chess. So having just, instead of just learning chess, okay, but then playing against each other, like having that importance of creating the interaction, because that's the core piece, right? That you're trying to replicate from the office, the interaction that you had doing whatever you're doing in the office and doing
Yeah.
it virtually.
Yeah, I don't want to like make it, I don't know why that triggered it for me, but I don't want to make it seem as if I'm also like, let's have fun all the time. Like we do have to have those meetings that are work focused. You're at work. You need to do those. My point, I think, is mostly you need to have those other fun and interactive times to make those work meetings work better. Because they're going to be engaged no matter what you do. If they know that they have those other times that are coming, they're going to be like, oh, well, now I really want to show up for my team because like, I would never want to try to sacrifice what we have or let anybody down, or they have this vested interest after you invest in them. They come back and they want to work harder for you because they don't want to sacrifice that feeling on the team, and they don't want to let anybody down. So you can go into those like necessary annual planning meetings, necessary road mapping, brainstorming sessions, and those should also be very scheduled and structured and like have a place on the calendar that they know they're coming, and you should be taking active notes. You should be recording those, and so you can go back and see like, okay, like we kind of butted heads on this. Like, how do we like confront that in our, interactive, like social engagement portion? So like my example for that would be, there is this vendor that I've been talking to. I hate that I can't remember her name right now, but she does incredible work, team building work with Legos. And what she does is she curates a kit with just random pieces of Lego, and she'll come in and work with your team, and each of them gets a box. And if they have to think of a question that they want to universally ask, so if you're working on something, say you're engineering or a developer and you're working on a new feature, and now we're going to ask, like, what does this feature look like to everybody? How does everybody thinking about this? What do they want to see? And then with those Legos, she gently guides you through what you want to create. And then she compares it and helps everybody kind of relate to everybody else's build. And it is like so stealth work. It's just like everybody's having fun, everybody's playing with Legos, they feel like they're playing with blocks, but you're actually doing really deep, intense team building work. And then all of a sudden, that problem that you identified in your road mapping is now no longer a problem, but you've solved it with fun. And that's like the balance that you need to create on your teams, is like, yes, we are at work, we're going to work, but we're also going to have a kick-ass time doing it.
100%, 100%. So you've mentioned New York City quite often. So one of the questions that I've been asked a number of times by companies is, right, location, location, location. Mm-hmm. And would love to hear your thoughts, not only building these events for Trello and Atlassian, but how can you think when advising potentially companies of what is their right location, right? On one side, there's pros and cons, right? If you go to a city like New York, God, there's endless things to do in New York, right? Or whatever kind of main city. There's museums and there's a place to eat and there's culture and there's all the different things that you could do. So there's so much to do. But at the same time, you have, especially when getting a larger group together, you have the opportunity where people can kind of just drift off on their own little places. And then you kind of lose that like cohesiveness and kind of interaction with the team, because these bunch of people went here, these bunch of people went there, and so forth, versus kind of the other end where you can go into, into Tuscany, or you can go, somewhere, I don't know, in Sedona, Arizona, right? Somewhere in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing around, where now people are, I don't call it isolated, but they're in one place. You can't really go out. There's nothing outside of the place to do. So it creates more of that cohesiveness, creates more of the opportunity for interaction. But again, maybe there's less things to do, maybe requiring more planning and things to do at the whatever
Yeah.
remote place there is. Would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. No, it's a great question and a good thought on that, because it's true. You do get people into a city and they scatter. And that tends to happen if you don't have good planning. And that's where it comes in, where you absolutely need someone who is skilled at planning to plan your schedule and your agenda and keep those people on track. Because if they have a breath of time where they're able to just go whatever the hell they want, they're going to do crazy things and you're going to have to pay for those crazy things, So like having a very thoughtful, planned out schedule that people need to adhere to because they're on a work trip is absolutely paramount. And if you have that, it really won't matter where you are. But it does work better when you're doing a global retreat or, having, 300 plus people in the same place, to do it in a place that's more like isolated and is a little just off the beaten path. And it does create, I take from The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. She has a whole chapter that's dedicated to like how to create the space, because every event that you have, creating that perfect space for it to happen in is a huge part of it. So, I mean, this definitely applies in this situation. If you keep everybody in the same place and you just have an amazing array and menu of things to do there, they're not going to want to go anywhere else. I remember when we did Trello together, the first couple of Trello togethers were in places like that. We went to a ranch in Scottsdale, Arizona. We didn't leave. And then one year we had a request from a few people that were like, can we try like a city? Like, can we see how that feels? So I brought 150 people to New Orleans and it was great. I didn't see anyone forever. It didn't matter what my schedule was. Like at night, once the schedule was over, people were at Harrah's and people were gambling here and splitting up there. And they weren't utilizing that off time, that free time to be together. And they would, to your point that we talked about a while ago, is like they would naturally be, going with the groups that they're working with all the time. They wouldn't be meeting new people and interacting with the people that they don't, and that's missed opportunity. And, unfortunately that has everything to do with location. So I learned my lesson very, very quickly. No more cities when it comes to large events. We have to go to places, like Lake Oconee. We went to the Ritz-Carlton in Georgia, and it was just kind of reminded me of Kellerman's from Dirty Dancing. And it was just like all of these really cool, fun events in the same place. We had a beautiful lake day. Everybody was like, yeah, this is better than New Orleans. I was like, yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be my experience. I recorded an episode earlier with Chase Warrington from Doist talking about this topic as well. And he's had the same experience of the feedback that he's gotten. I think, unfortunately, human beings, we've gotten to the point where we're always hustling, we're always running, especially right New Yorkers, Northeasterners, we're always running, we're always doing something. Just opportunity just to be, right? We don't have to be running, we don't have to be doing and things like that. And I like it if I heard it correctly from you that potentially the team, when it's just a team getting together, that cities are the opportunity, because again, they already know each other. They're working together on a daily basis. They have relationships, pre-existing relationships. So yes, if this small group of these people want to go here, someone want to stay in the place, and that's
gravitate towards each other.
Yeah. But when you get the whole company together, and you're really trying to mesh and get people across the organization together, maybe that again is better to have the opportunity there. But I want to dive into, again, something yourself, just to maybe clarify or just to kind of pick your brain on this, because it seemed like another point that I'm like, maybe I don't think the same way. So again, I love the opportunity here.
I like it.
So we'd love
Allow
to
me to
again.
convince you.
Yeah, please. We'll call it a company retreat, and then we kind of spoke about it before, like what you do, but maybe like what the makeup of an actual day there is, because yes, it's more fun and things like that, but yes, there is some work. So is there a right formula. Again, I know it Envision, especially the second one, we kind of used a 50-30-20 approach. I know Doist uses a similar one where it's like 50% unstructured free time, there's 30% structured free time, and 20% of work. So we use that Envision, again, from feedback from our first IRL. I think it was absolutely fantastic. Probably the most memorable and biggest impactful things that I had, moments I had at that IRL, where we were in Phoenix in February, so it was cold at night, right? There were little couches all over the place with campfire things in the middle. Sitting next to the campfire, like drinking a beer, talking to somebody I didn't know, like those little moments in that unstructured way, I can kind of hang out or what have you. So is there, you see a right formula of, again, work plus structured plus unstructured? And should there be requirements? Like, should you have to come to this? Like, I guess if it's a work thing, then probably yes. But if it's like a structured fun type thing, is it, hey, come if you want to come? Or maybe, again, this is what we're doing and we're organizing this. And if you want to come, great. If you don't want to come, that's great too.
Yeah, I hate the word mandatory. I just think, like, especially in conjunction with a retreat, it's like, but in some necessity, it is necessary in some situations, so I think like the dinners and breaking bread is like the best way to connect with people. Like it's, it just encompasses everything. Like you just have great conversation. You talk about the food. It's just easy. So I always think that meals are absolutely, you have to be there, like you have to come. There is a, I wouldn't say a pressure because that's too hard a word, but like, that this is a social contract that you're going into, like there has to be some things you're there for. When I am very specific about structure and schedule, and I don't know, maybe type A personality, but I do think I think I have a magic formula for it. And it has a lot to do with breaks. And, I've gone to different offsites that have 0 breaks. You're going and they're thinking that they're thoughtfully planning these things, but you're going through brainstorming and then you're going to another thing. And like all of a sudden I'm totally burnt out. And then it's like, okay, here we go. We're going to go to lunch together. And now we're going to go do a team building. And there's like, can I go back to my hotel and just like be a person for a second and not be, because like no matter what you do, you're in front of your work people. You're a different person. Like I want to go home and be the person I am when the door closes, and like everybody has that alter ego, that they need to turn off for a second.
Yeah. Even like a break. I mean, in the sense of like, I know one of the first days in Arizona, unfortunately I didn't get to go because I had sprained my ankle maybe 2 weeks before that, but there was like a hike, right? We're in the mountains, there's trailing hikes. So just imagine you're going on an hour-long hike and now you come back, right? You probably want to take a shower or maybe clean up. You want to maybe have some water, just relax. People? Yeah, like, and even if the next thing you're going to do is still fun and it's not work, where you kind of have to maybe, but it's still like, hey, or it's right before lunch, right? Do I want to come straight from like sweating and like grueling and being dirty coming from like a hike and then go right to the meal? Or relax, have an hour, take a shower, do what you need to do, and then kind of show up. I'm not on vacation, still at a work event, but I'm also not a robot. I can't just go from one thing to another. I'm an extrovert. Like we said before, like I could easily do that all day long and be okay. At the end of the day, I am unusual at best, so I'm with you.
There's no way more people are like me. There's a lot of people like me, but, no, I would say my formula is, so let's take Trello together, for example. We always went on a Monday through a Thursday. So Monday would be arrival day. Everybody's coming in. I give a set window that I encourage you to arrive in, just so that you have time before the welcome dinner happens that night at 7 p.m. So it's like you have all day. You can do whatever you want. You want to get there early in the morning and experience the resort for a little while. There's nothing planned for you. Get in, get settled, have lunch, do whatever you want to do. And then we have the welcome dinner Everything is, it goes from like 7 to 10. And then afterwards, people are, able to go have those times by a fireside and like have beers and welcome each other into, the retreat. The next day, we have, I have a, big breakfast. It's usually at like 9 a.m. Give people an ability to kind of wake up and, not be up at 7 a.m., and we do it usually from like 9 or 9:30 to like 11 o'clock. And then at 11 o'clock, we go right into our town hall. So when we were doing Trello together, we would get everybody together. We'd welcome them to the retreat. We'd tell them what they can expect from the next couple of days. Tell them what the intention of everything is. Just like people want to know what they're in for, And then we do a couple of like really fun little like team building kind of exercises in there, or somebody will present on something that's really exciting. And then we break, and you get at least an hour before, lunch is served at 1 o'clock. Like that town hall, only an hour. That's it. We don't need to be in there for more than that. We can cover everything in that time. So then they have an hour before they can go down for lunch. We all have lunch together. And then they go to the activity that's scheduled for that day. So I always had a menu of activities. So beforehand, I would send out a survey when I was in the planning mode, and people would select the activity they wanted to do, or they would be like, I don't want an activity. I want to go lay by the pool. Like, I don't want to do anything. I want to go read my book in my room. So they could either participate in that thing or they didn't have to. So that usually went from like, I don't know, 3 o'clock to like 6 o'clock. Or 5 o'clock, and then you would get back. You'd have 2 hours before dinner. Dinner was at 7. You'd be able to go get dressed, whatever you needed to do, and then you'd show up for dinner. And then after dinner, that's it. You there it is. You have your whole day. You can go back and sleep. If you're totally exhausted, you can go and hang out with everybody. We mostly ended up anywhere we were. We ended up by a pool table or darts by the end of the night, like that. And those were when like the best conversations happened, late night. It was just like, everybody doesn't want to go to bed. Everybody's energized from the day. We're all talking about what activities we did and all of this stuff. And then the next day is like pretty similar without the town hall. So there's usually no work the next full day. We'll have an activity, a hike in the morning that is completely voluntary. You want to get up at 7 a.m. and go do the hike, go for it. And most of the time people had been, drinking or something the night before. We had like 40 people sign up for it. We maybe have 10, it happens. But that's a sign of a really good retreat, in my opinion. And then Thursday is travel day. So you go home, whatever time that makes sense for you, whenever you need to get out of there, leave. I'd honor like extensions for the day if people wanted to sleep in and things like that, and catch their flights later. I'd have lunch, I'd have breakfast. Usually like I would have little lunch, breakfast boxes packed for people who wanted to take early flights. It's the little things like that, but very relaxed, very easy. Okay. You walk away from there feeling refreshed and not completely overwhelmed.
Okay, yeah, so we're definitely on the same page here. As I thought, I just I guess misheard something. So those little points. So I want to bring up a little point where, again, I think and connecting the little point with the meals, which we spoke about, lunches and dinners, which is I think something again many companies miss out and don't think about. And I experienced this at the Envision IRL in Arizona, that it was very much of a sociological experiment, right? Everyone is not like you and I, right? The social butterflies, we're talking, we're meeting everyone. At every meal, each team sat siloed together, right? Your APAC sales team with your APAC sales team, your iOS team with your iOS team, and everyone sat together. Me, either as an extrovert or me being the first hire at the company, and outside of 2 co-founders, literally everyone there came after me, and I didn't probably know anything about 90% of those people that were there. I purposely sat at a different table every single meal. I refused to sit with my team. They harassed me the whole time. Why aren't you sitting with us? Why aren't you sitting with us? I'm like, listen, I talk to you every day. I know you. Like these people here, I would never have any interaction with. I wouldn't know it. If it wasn't for this meal. Exactly. If it wasn't for this meal, we wouldn't have the interaction. So what should companies, or how can companies, right? Because you're getting everyone from the rest of the whole world, the whole country, everyone's flying in, everyone's getting connected. But human nature is human nature, and people tend to kind of talk and go with clans or groups or teams and spend the time talking to the people they really know. And that's not the whole point of getting that entire organization together. It's to build those interactions, relationships with people. So suggestions that you may have or you may have done to get those people from different teams to sitting with each other. So it's not like those meals where your iOS team is sitting with your iOS team and everyone sits and, okay, you're kind of on your own little land there.
Yeah, I will. I think when it comes to, I mostly with dinners, to be honest, because like when it comes to breakfast, when it comes to lunches, I'm like, breakfast, people are just waking up. Some people are not morning people. You know, you don't want to be forced into an interaction when you've just woken up. Like, go find wherever you need to sit and eat, you know? And like lunch is kind of the same thing. We're all usually in a different, you know, we'll go with our groups, we'll gravitate toward those people that we're comfortable with. That's fine as well, because for the most part, if you're planned the right way, I'm going to be interacting with different people the whole rest of the day anyway. So that's not going to matter. Dinners matter. Dinners matter because you have gone through this whole day interacting with different people, and now you have an opportunity to interact even more with a bigger group of people. So 2 words: assigned seating. You have to do assigned seating and break up those silos and do it intentionally, because like, you know who's at your retreat. You have a whole roster of people. Like, you can easily just mess that up in an Excel spreadsheet and throw a bunch of random names onto a table and break up those teams. And then all of a sudden the onus is taken away from them, and they are so much happier with that. They're like, well, I don't have to, because they don't have to choose now. They know what the right thing is to do. They know they should be going and sitting at that table and talking to new people. They know this is what this is about. But the part of that, some people are stopped by it. They're kind of frozen by the idea of like having to engage in small talk. And how do I start this? And there's so much pressure there. Take the pressure away from them. Be like, no, you're doing this now, because this is what we're here for, and this is a safe environment, and everybody is here for the same reason. So go talk to somebody. You know, so I think that's the most important thing you can do. And it's such an easy fix for people that like you don't think about. It's just like, I have this whole roster, let me use it.
I love that idea. That's, I think, a fantastic idea. And so, again, it's so simple, right? You don't have to hope that people interact. It's just, hey, right? People are eating in a meal area. We're all eating in the cafe, whatever the dining area is. Hey, and maybe it makes it more fancy, right? Oh, you have like a wedding table card with your name and a number on there.
It's like, no, you're here.
Yeah.
Write your name.
Yeah, make it more fun.
I even have done it where I've had like, it's like a wedding, because I've been a wedding planner. I've planned a couple of weddings now. And like, you'll have a table that has like, they'll walk in and they'll immediately see it and they'll say, oh, I'm at a table. Oh, that's interesting. You know, and it's just like automatically they're kind of excited by the idea, because they're like, ooh, who am I going to sit with? It's like the first day of school. You know?
Yeah. I'm with you. So as remote OGs, we perfectly understand the impact that IRLs can have, but would love, again, maybe from your experience, to really hear, I mean, especially if there's any data that you can share, or just, you know, testimonials, like truly, what is that feedback? What have you seen through your time with Trello, building for Trello and building for Atlassian? Like, what has been that impact? Like, what has been the feedback? What have you been able to see through data? Increases in engagement, increases in connecting to the mission, increases in happiness, and reduction in churn, or reduction of losing employees. Like, I want people to understand, right? This, which will probably kind of be connected to my next question, right? This is going to cost a whole chunk of money.
Yes. What's the ROI?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You want to know that, hey, this is going to be worth its time. So we'd love to hear, again, from your experience, what you've seen.
I wish. So I am really big on surveys. You cannot know what you're doing wrong until you ask somebody, what am I doing wrong? You know, like, I'm not going to do everything perfect. I don't assume to know that like, I'm like the guru of offsites. You know what I mean? There are going to be things I miss for people, and it might be minute, but like, I want to know that people are heard. And like, most people who are very, very, who are introverted and could never even think about giving constructive feedback to somebody about an event, you know, they're given a voice by an anonymous survey. You know, they're able to say, you know, I kind of didn't like the fact that I had to be forced into that situation. Like, I would rather it be done this way. And like, you can hear that, and you can, you know, there's some there's some things that are just a little nitpicky, and you can't integrate and you can't please everybody, but there are things that, make you take pause and be like, ooh, I could change that a little bit. And that affected somebody in a way. The one survey I wish I had done after every Trello Together was like a productivity, like what happened to productivity after these events happened. And I never did that. But you can see it, you can feel it. Like there's a buzz about people. They're excited. Like I know it's not tangible and you can't like see it on a spreadsheet, but like that feeling it's unmatched. And it carries throughout the year if you do it correctly, and you can see it maybe there's some evidence to it in like your stock price if you're a public company, like we're just doing better work. We're happier people. And it's hard to measure happiness sometimes, but it can be done. And I do want to kind of find out the way to do that. But I truly believe that the reason that Trello to this day, despite being acquired, despite losing, we lost 4 of our founders at one time last year. It was that time we had to, evolve into a new age of Trello, and it could have been devastating. It could, our culture could have been obliterated. I left the team as well, but because we made such an investment in this and we spent the money to tell our people how to carry on this legacy and how to do Trello, we're fine. The culture is amazing. Still, everybody's carrying these rituals and these traditions on with them because they're so important. They know how important they are. So like, it's really inspiring to me to look back and see like some of the things that I put in place, like still are laurels, and that's kind of how you can measure it. If your culture can survive huge change management, then you're doing something right.
I couldn't agree more. So related to the cost of these events, right? We're unfortunately at a time globally where in a recession, many companies are downsizing and many companies are obviously looking where they spend money. I've been preaching this since the beginning of last year of if you're ever going to spend money on your employees and engagement and happiness, like now is the time more than any ever. Yeah. Like when things are down, when things are bad, like, hey, your team needs us more than anything else. But again, people are thinking about numbers and things like that.
Of course.
Advice that you can give for companies that want to do something, that want to get people together, maybe without breaking the bank. And it could be something like a location, right? New York City tends to be expensive anyway, but it's also those things of if you're taking everyone to the Met Museum or to the Lincoln Square for whatever, right? That's thousands of dollars just for tickets to get into these things versus, right, again, maybe it's that opportunity of better to go out somewhere, right? Because it doesn't cost anything to go for a hike. It doesn't cost anything to go sit around a campfire. Maybe any kind of tips you have for companies to think about of how to still get people together, but not necessarily, again, spend too much money that they don't have or they're not willing to spend.
I think a really great way to do that would be to do the smaller kind of regional connections, but do it as like a really structured kind of event for your team. So for instance, you could do something like identifying the 4 cities that you have the most people in, organizing a dinner at a nice restaurant or an event or a team building event, something that they can all come to and come together in those small groups, but it's, connected to the other ones because everybody's doing kind of the same thing, just in different groups. And it'll cost you much less money because you're not, and there's no travel and expenses involved. You don't have to do hotels. It's a 1-day thing. But if you do it correctly, and it'll start a buzz, people will start talking about it. Like, oh my God, wasn't that so cool? Like I went out to dinner here. It'll start conversations and it won't cost you a cent. It's just about thinking more thoughtfully about those things. And like, that's where virtual events also come into it as well. You don't have to do the IRL if you can't afford it, but you can do a really, really awesome virtual event that'll make your team feel connected without breaking the bank. again. There's also like little just like life cycle gifts. Like on Trello, we used to send, here, I'll show it to you. Tacos. So they're little 3D printed dogs. They're our mascot. And we have been sending these for year anniversaries since the start of Trello. So every time you have a year on Trello, you get a taco dog in the mail. They're $25. And I, we ship them all over now because we're, 350 people, a little more expensive, and I have to outsource, the distribution of it and everything. So, but very small cost. I cannot tell you how important this tradition is to if we were to get rid of every employee experience program that we had on Trello, we'd be keeping that. And it's just the littlest thing to make your team feel connected to one product and to one thing. I feel valued. I get this little thing every year. I look forward to it. These are the kinds of things when you don't have the money in the bank, there's still ways to bring your team together and make you feel cohesive.
I love the taco thing, and maybe just that connection to longevity and being proud that you've been there. I remember at the IRL that I went to, like everyone on the name tags, they had the name. I think there was the team and exactly how long they were there with the team. And I think mine was like 6 years, 11 months. I think like a week after the IRL would have been 7 years. And when I got there, I'm like, no. Like you're changing that to 7 years. Like, yeah. I don't want to know six like years. Like people should know that, hey, I've been here for 7 years. And Absolutely. I took pride in that. I'm like, yes, I'm the OG of OGs here. Like, and it made me feel like something and connecting. And I did like one of the most purposeful things I did was grab the other OGs who've been there at that point for like 5+ years. And there were I think there were about like 15 of us, and just did a picture of just us 5+ year. And like that moment of sitting with these, like, yes, I used to talk to these people every day. We worked hand in hand. And then obviously as the years kind of went by, like we interacted less and less because, and again, especially in an early stage company, most early hires are developers, and I wasn't on the development team. But just having that feeling like, yes, we used to interact all the time. It gave me a little bit of that pride. So last question, I know cognizant of time, even though I want to spend like the rest of the day. I think my kids and my family are knocking on the door, like wondering when are we going to dinner and all that good stuff. So the leaders who've been listening to this podcast, we're now totally sold. Yes. Okay. We got to be doing IRLs. We got to be getting like, yes, they're totally all in. Maybe your 3 best pieces or 3 first pieces of advice on where to get started.
Yeah. Okay. So not taking money out of the equation, which I know is very hard to do. But I would say one of my first things would be, make sure there's no work in your work retreat. That would be my absolute first thing. I would never plan a work retreat that felt like a conference. That it's pointless. It's purposeless. And if we're going to go by my art of gathering, which I've referenced several times, it's all about the purpose. There is a reason you're all getting together, and the reason most of the time is for connective purposes. So let's, honor that. I would say the second thing would be have a dedicated event planner plan your events. Don't leave it to your executive assistants or your engineering managers. Some of them, this is not in their wheelhouse, and they're going to be completely overwhelmed. They're not going to tell you they're overwhelmed, but it's going to be too much for their plate because this is a full-time job. And it takes thought, it takes detail, and it takes skill. And if you have a whole bunch of people in your company planning a whole bunch of different offsites, what you're going to get is a discrepancy in caliber of experience. And that is going to be a culture killer for you, because nobody is going to feel cohesive if one person is going, like you're saying, to the Met on an amazing scavenger hunt and another person sat in a conference room because that's what they think of offsites. So yes, hire someone. The third piece I would say would be hire me. Kidding, but not really. I am working on kind of a side hustle that I hope to one day make my main hustle. I'm calling it Gather with LL. And I really want to make employee experience accessible and a service, essentially. So employee experience as a service. So if you need someone, you're listening to this and you need someone to rattle off ideas, even just talk to you about how you want to structure your offsites, or you want somebody to plan something for you from top to bottom, and that could be as simple as a networking dinner to as extravagant as a 3-day retreat. My email is gatherwithll@gmail.com, and I would love to hear from you.
Amazing. Yeah, that's the way we end up on every episode. It's, people want to get in touch with you, people want to learn more about what you do, or obviously in this case, like somebody's overwhelmed, or they shouldn't even think about it being overwhelmed. Unless you have an event planner or someone with event planning experience that works for the company, no, do not plan it. Do not give it into anyone's hands. I don't care who it is. I don't care how much time they have. Get somebody professional, again, as you said, to do it the right way. So people, again, want to get a hold of you, learn more about you, have you plan their event. You mentioned the email address. Is there a website, social media?
The website is under construction right now. We're making it work. My good friend of mine is building it. She has an amazing studio called R2. Let me just make sure that I'm referencing her correctly. Yes, Robin Rotman is an amazing designer, graphic designer, and she's currently making the Gather with LL website. I'm going to be launching a blog on employee experience and all the things that I did right, all the things I did wrong. I really want it to be, I'm a very self-deprecating person, so I want it to be real and like, here, don't do this, things like that. But also just, give people inspiration, because I think when we gather together as a community, it's the only way that we're all going to get this right. Remote work, it takes thought and it takes planning, and it takes a village, like we always say. So.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. It's all learning experience. When we're successful, when we fail, and like those failures will go and help somebody else. We'll go help the next person prevent those failures potentially with their own team. So Liz, absolutely amazing. Again, as I said, if it wasn't for the kids and the family knocking on the door, trying to figure out when I'm coming to dinner, could talk about this all day. Well, maybe we'll have to have another follow-up episode, trying to go even deeper. But thank you so much for joining today and sharing all the amazing experience and stories of doing this, again, for many years with Trello and then with Atlassian and the way that you're thinking. And for everyone that's listening, until the next episode, have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning into today's show. I really hope you enjoyed it. My aim is for everyone listening to have one takeaway from each episode they can then go and use with their teams. If you enjoyed the show, please feel free to support me by subscribing in your favorite podcasting app, on our YouTube channel, share it with friends and colleagues, and please feel free to buy me a coffee via the show's website.